The Omega fainted in a stranger's arms at the ceremony and awoke later in the Alpha King's bed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Elena Moore had learned long ago how to take up as little space as possible, especially on nights like this, when the grand ceremony drew every alpha, beta, and ranked wolf into the stone hall beneath the open skylight. Moonlight spilled across polished floors, cool and pale, carrying with it the weight of expectation. Elena stood where she had been instructed to stand, near the outer ring of the gathering, close enough to witness but far enough to be forgotten. As an Omega without status or protection, she was present by permission alone, a formality no one bothered to question and no one truly cared about. The air was heavy with layered scents, sharp and overwhelming, pressing against her senses until her breathing slowed without her meaning it to. She kept her eyes lowered, fingers clasped in front of her, counting the steady rhythm of her pulse as voices echoed across the chamber and the ceremony moved forward with practiced precision. Each declaration rang louder than the last, each step toward the center reinforcing what Elena already knew, that this night was not meant for her. She felt it before it showed, a subtle dizziness that crept in behind her eyes, a faint warmth in her chest that didn't belong to fear or nerves. The sound around her seemed to stretch and blur, as if the hall itself were tilting. She tried to steady herself, shifting her weight, drawing a slow breath the way she had been taught, but the pressure only deepened. The moonlight above seemed suddenly too bright, the scents too close, the murmurs too sharp. Elena's knees weakened, the stone floor rushing toward her as the strength left her legs without warning. She never felt herself fall. Instead, there was warmth, solid and immediate, arms catching her with unshakable certainty. Just before the world went dark, she registered only fragments, a steady heartbeat beneath her ear, the muted hush of the crowd, and a calm voice issuing a single, controlled instruction that cut through the noise without effort. Then there was nothing. When consciousness began to return, it did so slowly, gently, like waking from deep water. Elena felt softness beneath her, unfamiliar sheets cool against her skin, the faint scent of cedar and night air surrounding her. Her lashes fluttered as she stirred, confusion settling in before memory could follow. This was not the stone hall. This was not the place she had collapsed. Somewhere beyond the quiet, footsteps moved with purpose, and Elena lay still, heart racing, unaware that the night she thought she would disappear into had already changed the course of her fate. Elena remained perfectly still as awareness settled fully into her body, afraid that any sudden movement would confirm a truth she was not ready to face. The bed beneath her was far wider than anything she had ever known, the mattress firm yet forgiving, the blankets smooth and heavy in a way that spoke of intention rather than comfort. She drew in a careful breath and immediately noticed the scent, clean and unmistakably alpha, not sharp or aggressive, but controlled, like a fire banked low. It surrounded her without pressing down, as if the room itself had been shaped to hold it. Her fingers curled slightly against the fabric, testing reality, and she slowly pushed herself upright, pausing when a faint dizziness brushed the edges of her vision. The ceiling above her was high, dark beams crossing overhead, moonlight slipping through tall windows framed in stone. This was no guest chamber, no infirmary, and certainly not a place meant for someone like her. A quiet panic stirred in her chest, not loud enough to steal her breath, but persistent, tapping against her ribs as questions began to surface. How long had she been here? Who had brought her? Why had she been allowed to remain? She swung her legs over the side of the bed, her bare feet touching a cool floor that sent a grounding chill through her. The simple white gown she wore was unfamiliar but modest, soft cotton instead of ceremonial fabric, chosen for rest rather than display. Someone had changed her clothes while she slept, a realization that should have frightened her more than it did. Instead, she felt only a strange certainty that no harm had been intended. The memory of collapsing returned in fragments, the sudden weakness, the blur of light, and then the arms that had caught her before she hit the stone floor. Strong arms. Steady. The stranger. Her heart skipped as she remembered the sound of his voice, calm and absolute, the way the noise in the hall had faded when he spoke. Elena arose slowly, moving toward the nearest window, careful not to disturb anything as if the room itself might be watching. Outside, the night stretched quiet and vast, the ceremony hall visible in the distance like a crown of light against the dark. Time had passed, but the world had not ended. The pack had not descended into chaos. That alone told her something important. She turned at the sound of footsteps beyond the door, her spine straightening instinctively as the handle turned without hesitation. The man who entered was the same one who had held her. She knew it before he spoke, before her eyes traced the familiar line of his shoulders and the calm authority in his posture. He was dressed simply now, dark shirt, sleeves rolled back, no crown, no visible symbol of rank. Yet the room seemed to respond to him, as if acknowledging something ancient and unspoken. He stopped several feet away, giving her space, his gaze steady but unreadable. "You are awake," he said, his voice just as controlled as she remembered. Elena swallowed and nodded, unsure what words she was allowed to use in a place like this. "Where am I?" she asked finally, her voice quieter than she intended. His eyes softened by a fraction, enough that she noticed. "You are safe," he replied, and for reasons she could not explain, she believed him before he said anything else. Elena hesitated, the word safe echoing in her mind as she searched his face for something she could name, fear or judgment or impatience, but found none of it there. Instead, there was a stillness that felt deliberate, as if he were holding himself back rather than looming forward. She drew a slow breath, steadying herself. "Safe from what?" she asked, immediately wishing she had chosen a less direct question. His gaze shifted briefly toward the window, where the moonlight traced pale lines across the stone floor, before returning to her. "Safe from the ceremony," he said. "Safe from the strain your body was under." The way he spoke her condition aloud, without dismissal or cruelty, unsettled her more than accusation ever could have. Elena wrapped her arms loosely around herself, not to shield but to ground, her fingers pressing into the fabric of the gown. "I did not mean to cause a disruption," she said quietly. "I know I should not have been near the center." His expression changed then, not sharply, but enough for her to sense that she had touched something important. "You were exactly where you were allowed to be," he replied. "The hall was at fault, not you." The words settled between them, unexpected and heavy. No one had ever defended her place in a room like that before. She took a step back without realizing it, the enormity of her surroundings pressing in all at once. This room, this presence, the certainty in his voice, none of it matched the life she knew. "Who are you?" she asked, the question finally finding its way past her caution. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he moved to a small table near the wall and poured water into a glass, his movements unhurried, precise. He offered it to her without crossing the distance between them, waiting until she took it from his hand. The contact was brief, barely a brush of fingers, but Elena felt it all the same, a quiet awareness that lingered after he let go. "Drink," he said. "Your pulse is still uneven." She obeyed, surprised again by how natural it felt to follow his instruction. When she lowered the glass, he met her eyes directly. "My name is Nathaniel Blackwood," he said. The name struck her with immediate force, recognition flaring sharp and undeniable. Her breath caught, the glass trembling slightly in her grip. "Alpha King." The realization was not loud, but it was complete, reshaping every moment since she had opened her eyes. She lowered the glass carefully, her instincts screaming to bow, to apologize, to retreat into silence, but she did none of those things. "You carried me," she said instead, her voice steady despite the rush of emotion. In the hall, his mouth curved in what might have been the faintest hint of a smile, though there was no amusement in his eyes. "I did," he replied. "You were losing consciousness. I was the closest." The simplicity of the explanation made it feel more real, not less. Elena nodded slowly, piecing together what that meant. He had been there, unseen by her, watching while others overlooked her entirely. And when her body had failed, he had not hesitated. "I should return to my quarters," she said, defaulting to the rules she knew. the ones that kept her unnoticed and safe. The pack will be waiting. Nathaniel's expression hardened, just slightly. No one will come looking for you tonight, he said. I ensured that. She looked at him, startled. Ensured how? By speaking, he answered calmly. By reminding them that an Omega's well-being is not a spectacle. The room seemed quieter after that, the weight of his authority settling into the space. Elena felt something shift inside her, not fear, but a fragile sense of being seen. She realized then that whatever had begun at the ceremony had not ended when she collapsed. It had followed her here, into the Alpha King's private chambers, and it was waiting for her to understand it. Elena felt the silence stretch after his words, the kind of silence that was not empty, but filled with meaning she had not yet learned how to interpret. She shifted her weight, suddenly aware of how small she must look standing in the Alpha King's private chamber, her borrowed gown brushing against her calves, her hair loose around her shoulders. I do not understand why you would intervene for me, she said at last, choosing honesty over caution. There were many others at the ceremony, many who mattered more. Nathaniel studied her, as if she had asked the most important question in the room. Because you were not well, he replied simply. And because no one else moved. The statement landed quietly but carried weight, stirring something unsettled in her chest. Elena looked down at her hands, remembering how the edges of the world had blurred, how her strength had slipped away without warning. I have attended ceremonies before, she said. I have never fainted. He nodded once, acknowledging that detail. That is because this ceremony was different, he said. The concentration of dominance was higher. The intent was sharper. For someone with your sensitivity, it would have felt overwhelming. Sensitivity. The word was not often used kindly in her world. Usually it came paired with weakness, with warnings to stay back or stay quiet. She lifted her gaze to him again. You speak as though you noticed me before I fell. His eyes did not leave her face. I did, he said. Elena felt her pulse jump, a quiet reaction she could not control. She took a slow step toward the window again, needing distance to think, to breathe. Outside, the night was beginning to thin, the moon inching lower in the sky. Soon the pack would sleep, and by morning, rumors would stir like mist. What will they think? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. When they realize where I spent the night. Nathaniel moved then, not toward her, but closer to the door, placing himself between her and whatever waited beyond it. They will think what I allow them to think, he said. No one will question your presence here. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. The certainty in his tone made her chest tighten, not with fear, but with an unfamiliar sense of protection. Elena pressed her palm lightly against the cool stone of the window frame. I do not want trouble to follow me, she said. I have learned how to avoid being noticed. His reply came without hesitation. Tonight, being noticed kept you alive. She turned at that, startled by the seriousness in his voice. He met her gaze evenly. Your body reacted to something it recognized, he continued. That is not coincidence. Elena felt heat rise to her face, confusion tangling with a strange pull she did not yet have language for. Recognized what? She asked. Nathaniel did not answer right away. Instead, he looked toward the bed, then back to her, as if weighing how much truth the moment could hold. The bond between Alpha and Omega is not always loud, he said carefully. Sometimes it appears as discomfort, as imbalance, as collapse. Your fainting was not failure. It was a signal. The room seemed to tilt slightly, not with dizziness this time, but with understanding she was not ready to claim. You are saying this happened because of you? She said. His jaw tightened just enough for her to notice. I am saying it happened because of us, he corrected. Elena's breath caught. The idea felt too large, too sudden, threatening the fragile boundaries she had built around herself. I need time, she said, the words leaving her before she could soften them. Nathaniel inclined his head, accepting the boundary without resistance. You will have it, he said. Rest here tonight. At dawn, we will speak again. He reached for the door, then paused. Elena, he added, her name spoken with deliberate care. Whatever begins here will not strip you of choice. That is my word. When he left, the door closing quietly behind him, Elena stood alone in the Alpha King's chamber, her heart steady but alert, knowing that by morning, the life she had carefully survived might no longer be enough to contain what was waking inside her. Sleep did not come easily after Nathaniel left, but when it did, It was deep and dreamless, the kind that settled into Elena's bones and eased the lingering strain she had carried for years without naming it. When she woke again, pale morning light filtered through the tall windows, softer than moonlight, touching the stone walls with a gentler promise. For a moment she did not remember where she was, only that she felt rested in a way that surprised her. Then awareness returned, bringing with it the quiet weight of the previous night. She sat up slowly, noting that her dizziness was gone, her breathing even. The room felt different in daylight, still imposing but less secretive, as if it were revealing itself honestly. A neatly folded set of clothes rested on a chair near the bed, simple but well made, chosen with care rather than extravagance. Elena stood and dressed, the fabric fitting comfortably, neither restrictive nor overly loose, as though someone had taken the time to consider her size and movement. The realization stirred something cautious and warm inside her. A soft knock sounded at the door, not demanding, not hesitant. When she answered, it was not Nathaniel but an older woman with kind eyes and steady posture, introduced quietly as the household steward. "Breakfast is prepared," the woman said. "His Majesty asked that you eat before speaking with him." Elena nodded, thanking her, and followed down corridors that seemed to breathe history. Servants she passed lowered their gazes respectfully, not toward the floor but away from her, as if deliberately granting privacy. No one whispered. No one stared. It was a courtesy she had rarely known. The breakfast room overlooked the eastern grounds, sunlight stretching across manicured paths and ancient trees. Elena ate slowly, savoring warmth and calm, listening to birdsong instead of judgment. When Nathaniel entered, the room shifted again, not with tension but with focus. He wore a lighter coat now, his presence no less commanding but softened by the morning. He did not rush her, waiting until she finished before speaking. "You slept?" he observed. "Yes," she replied, surprised to find that she meant more than rest. He nodded, satisfied. "That tells me the imbalance has eased." Elena set her cup down carefully. "You said we would speak again at dawn," she said. He took a seat across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I did," he agreed. "There is something you should know before the pack awakens fully." He paused, choosing his words with the same care she had noticed before. The ceremony was designed to draw out potential bonds. It does not create them, but it reveals pressure points. In rare cases, it accelerates recognition. Elena's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table. "You believe that is what happened to me." "I know it is what happened," he corrected gently. She met his gaze, searching for certainty without demand. "Why now?" she asked. "Why me?" Nathaniel's expression grew thoughtful. "Bonds are not rewards for status," he said. "They respond to compatibility and timing. Last night, the hall was filled with intent, but you were the only one who did not try to claim or compete. You were open without reaching. That openness has consequences." The words settled slowly, rearranging the way Elena saw herself. She had always thought survival meant shrinking. Perhaps it had meant something else all along. "What happens next?" she asked. Nathaniel leaned back slightly. "Next, you return to your life for the day," he said. "I will not announce anything. I will observe, and so will you. If what began last night continues to resonate, we will address it together, publicly and with care." Elena exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. "You would let me choose," she said, not a question this time. "Always," he replied. She stood then, steadier than she had been in the ceremony hall, feeling the ground beneath her feet with new clarity. As the steward returned to escort her, Nathaniel spoke once more. "Elena," he said, "whatever the pack believes, remember this. You did not collapse because you were weak. You stood long enough for fate to find you." She left the Alpha King's presence with her head high, stepping back into the world not as someone hidden at the edges, but as someone newly aware that being seen did not have to mean being consumed. Elena returned to the outer grounds as the day fully unfolded, sunlight warming the stone paths and stirring the pack in motion, and for the first time she noticed how the air felt different against her skin, not heavier or lighter, but more responsive, as if her senses were no longer dulled by habit. Whispers moved like a distant current, present but indistinct, and she realized with a quiet start that the murmurs were not about her collapse, not the way she expected. People glanced at her, and then away, expressions neutral, restrained, careful. The absence of ridicule felt louder than mockery ever had. She kept her pace steady, recalling Nathaniel's words about observation, about letting what began reveal itself without force. At the edge of the training fields, she paused, watching alphas gather in small groups, their voices measured, their postures unusually contained. It struck her then that the pack was adjusting, not to her presence, but to an unspoken directive that had already taken root. The Alpha King's influence moved without announcement. Elena turned toward the gardens where Omegas often worked in quiet clusters, and as she approached, conversation softened rather than stopped. A young woman she recognized nodded to her, respectful, tentative, not unkind. "Are you feeling better?" she asked, genuine concern in her tone. "Yes," Elena replied, surprised by how true it felt. "Much better." As she knelt to tend the herbs, she noticed her hands no longer trembled, her breathing even, her thoughts clear. The faint pull she had sensed since waking did not tug insistently, but it was present all the same, a subtle alignment that seemed to steady her rather than distract. When she straightened, a shadow crossed the path, and she looked up to find Nathaniel standing at a respectful distance, not surrounded by guards, not elevated above the space, simply present. Conversation around them ebbed naturally, attention redirecting without command. He inclined his head, acknowledging her without summoning her, and continued on his way. The simplicity of the gesture sent a ripple through her chest. He had seen her, publicly, without possession or proclamation. The day moved forward with quiet tests. She passed near the council hall and felt a brief pressure behind her eyes, then relief as the sensation eased. She crossed the inner courtyard and sensed his presence before she saw him again, not because he drew attention, but because something in her recognized the steadiness he carried. When dusk approached, the pack gathered informally near the central fire, not a ceremony, not an announcement, just habit drawing them together. Elena lingered at the edge, uncertain, until an elder gestured her closer with a nod that carried neither pity nor expectation. As she took a seat, warmth spread through her chest, not sudden, not overwhelming, but affirming. Nathaniel spoke then, addressing the group without raising his voice. "The ceremony has concluded," he said. "The purpose was observation, not judgment. We will proceed with our season as planned." There was no mention of her name, no explanation offered. And yet, when his gaze met hers briefly, she felt the quiet certainty of inclusion. Later, as the fire burned lower and the pack dispersed, Nathaniel approached her once more, this time stopping within a few feet. "You navigated today well," he said. She met his eyes, calm answering calm. "I followed your advice," she replied. "I watched." He nodded, approval unspoken but clear. "Did you feel it again?" he asked. She considered the question honestly. "Not a strain," she said. "More like balance." His expression softened. "That is the distinction that matters. The bond does not demand. It aligns." He stepped back then, granting her space once more. "Tomorrow," he said, "we will speak with the council, not about fate, but about choice." Elena watched him go, the firelight tracing his path, and understood that what was unfolding did not require spectacle to be real. The pack was shifting around her, subtly, respectfully, and for the first time, she did not brace for the change. She welcomed it, knowing that when the moment came to step forward, she would not be stepping alone. Morning arrived with a sense of quiet resolve, the kind that settled before important decisions rather than after them, and Elena felt it as soon as she stepped onto the stone path leading toward the council hall. The building stood at the heart of the territory, its tall doors open to the air, inviting rather than imposing, yet every wolf who approached did. So with care, she paused at the edge of the courtyard, aware that this was the first time she had been expected rather than merely permitted. Nathaniel was already there, speaking in low tones with several council members, his posture relaxed but attentive. When he noticed her, he inclined his head, not summoning her forward, simply acknowledging her presence as equal to the moment. The council gathered inside, elders and advisors forming a wide circle, leaving space at the center not as a command but as an option. Elena took a measured breath and stepped into that space on her own. No one murmured. No one laughed. The silence felt intentional. Nathaniel addressed the council first, his voice calm and steady. "We are not here to declare a bond," he said. We are here to discuss what has already begun to affect the pack. An elder with silver hair studied Elena closely, not unkindly. The ceremony revealed a response, the elder said. Such responses are rare. Elena felt the weight of the attention but did not shrink from it. She clasped her hands lightly, grounding herself in the present. I did not seek attention, she said, her voice carrying farther than she expected. I did not plan for anything to happen, but I also will not pretend that nothing did. Her honesty shifted something in the room. Nathaniel's gaze remained on her, not evaluating, simply listening. The bond you sensed, another council member asked, did it bring fear or clarity? Elena considered carefully. At first, fear, she admitted, because change always does. But after that, clarity, like standing straight after years of leaning away from the wind. A murmur of understanding moved through the circle. Nathaniel spoke again. Bonds that weaken choice are not bonds we honor, he said. What formed here has not constrained Elena. It has strengthened her awareness. That matters. The eldest council member nodded slowly. Then the question is not whether a bond exists, the elder said. It is whether both parties are willing to recognize it openly, in time. All eyes turned to Elena. She felt her pulse steady rather than race. I am willing to continue observing, she said, to learn what this means without pressure. And I asked the same respect from the pack that any alpha would be granted. The request was simple, but it carried weight. Nathaniel inclined his head toward her, a gesture of agreement that required no explanation. The council conferred briefly, then the elder spoke. The pack will treat this matter with discretion, the elder said. There will be no speculation, no interference. When and if a declaration is made, it will be made together. Relief did not flood Elena, but something steadier replaced tension, a sense of alignment that felt earned. As the council dispersed, Nathaniel remained with her, the hall emptying around them. You spoke well, he said quietly. She allowed herself a small smile. I spoke honestly. He regarded her for a moment, then extended his hand, palm up, not a demand but an invitation. Walk with me, he said. She placed her hand in his, the contact brief but grounding, and together they moved toward the open doors. Outside, the pack continued its day, unaware of the subtle shift that had just been confirmed. Nathaniel released her hand once they stepped into the sunlight. From this point forward, he said, nothing will be decided without your voice. Elena met his gaze, understanding now that what connected them was not spectacle or command, but mutual recognition. As they parted to rejoin their respective paths, she realized that the faint pull she had felt since the ceremony was no longer something she feared. It was a quiet promise, unfolding at its own pace, waiting not for permission, but for trust. The days that followed the council meeting unfolded with a measured calm that felt deliberate rather than accidental, and Elena found herself moving through her routines with a new awareness of how closely the pack watched without intruding. No one questioned her presence near the inner paths, no one redirected her away from spaces once reserved for higher ranks, yet no one pressed her for answers either. It was as if an unspoken boundary had been drawn around her, not isolating her, but protecting her right to exist without explanation. Nathaniel remained visible but distant, never seeking her out in public, never avoiding her either, his steadiness a constant point of reference. When she sensed him nearby, it was not a pull that demanded attention, but a quiet alignment that made her feel more present in her own body. One afternoon, as clouds gathered low and the air carried the promise of rain, Elena found herself standing at the edge of the overlook that faced the forest beyond the territory. She had come there often as a child, when she needed space to think, but this time the familiar view felt altered, as if she were seeing it from a slightly different height. You are learning to listen to it, Nathaniel's voice said behind her, calm and unhurried. She did not startle. She had known he was there before he spoke. To what? She asked, turning to face him. To yourself, he replied. To what your body is telling you before your fear does. Elena considered that, her gaze returning to the tree-line. Since the ceremony, she had noticed subtle changes, not dramatic, not alarming, but undeniable. Her senses no longer dulled at the edges when alphas passed nearby. Instead of shrinking, her awareness sharpened, as if her instincts were recalibrating. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she could sense Nathaniel's presence even from a distance, not as a voice or image, but as a steady point of balance. It frightened her less with each passing day. I did not know Omegas could feel like this, she admitted. His expression softened. Most never have the chance, he said. Their responses are often suppressed early, mislabeled as weakness rather than sensitivity. Elena exhaled slowly. So what am I becoming? She asked, not expecting an easy answer. Nathaniel stepped beside her, leaving a respectful space between them as he looked out over the forest. You are becoming more fully what you already were, he said. The bond does not add something foreign. It amplifies what exists. She turned that over in her mind, the idea settling gradually. That evening, the rain finally came, light at first, then steady, drumming softly against stone and leaves. Elena returned to her quarters, senses humming quietly beneath her skin, and slept without dreams. When she woke before dawn, she felt the pull again, gentler than before, guiding rather than urging. She followed it outside, stopping beneath the covered archway as the last of the rain faded into mist. Nathaniel stood there as well, already waiting, though he did not say that he had been. You feel it more clearly now, he observed. She nodded. It is not loud, she said, but it is constant. That is how it should be, he replied. Bonds that demand attention exhaust the spirit. Those that endure integrate. Elena met his gaze, something settling firmly into place. Inside her, if we continue, she said, carefully choosing each word, it must remain like this. Balanced. He inclined his head. That is my intention. They stood together in the quiet that followed, the pack still asleep, the world holding its breath between night and day. Elena realized then that the bond was no longer a question of what might happen to her, but of how she would walk forward with intention. She was no longer reacting to forces beyond her control. She was participating. And when the sun finally broke through the thinning clouds, she did not shield her eyes. She faced the light, steady and unafraid, knowing that whatever came next would be shaped not by fear, but by choice. The final gathering took place at twilight, not announced with horns or ceremony, but everyone felt it coming, the way the air grows still before a long-awaited decision. Elena stood near the central fire, no longer at the edge, no longer hidden, her posture calm, her breathing steady, her presence unchallenged. Wolves gathered in quiet clusters, conversations low, eyes respectful rather than curious. Nathaniel approached from the opposite side of the clearing, not elevated, not distant, simply walking as he always did, yet the space between them seemed to narrow of its own accord. When he stopped beside her, he did not touch her, but the familiarity between them was unmistakable, a shared steadiness that did not require demonstration. The elder who had led the council stepped forward, staff resting lightly against the ground. We gather tonight to acknowledge what has already taken root, the elder said. Not to impose, not to demand, but to witness. Elena felt the subtle shift as attention focused, not sharp, not invasive, but present. Nathaniel spoke next, his voice carrying without effort. I will not speak for Elena, he said. If there is to be recognition, it will come from her as much as from me. He turned to her then, leaving the moment entirely in her hands. Elena felt the weight of choice settle fully, not heavy, but real. She stepped forward, the firelight warming her face, and lifted her gaze to meet the pack. I was raised to believe that survival meant staying unseen, she said. That an Omega's strength was measured by how little space she took. A few heads bowed, acknowledgement passing quietly through the crowd. But what I learned here is that balance is not found in hiding, she continued. It is found in standing honestly, without fear of being diminished. She turned then, looking at Nathaniel, not with awe, not with submission, but with clarity. I choose to recognize what exists between us, she said, not as surrender, not as obligation, but as partnership. Nathaniel inclined his head, a deep, respectful gesture. I receive that choice, he replied, and I return it. The elder nodded once, staff tapping softly against the earth. Then let it be known, the elder said, that this bond stands not as command, but as accord. A ripple moved through the pack, not applause, not cheers, but a collective exhale, acceptance settling naturally into place. Nathaniel extended his hand, palm open, waiting. Elena placed her hand in his, the contact grounding, familiar, steady. There was no surge, no spectacle, only alignment. the sense of two paths choosing to run side by side. As the fire burned lower and the gathering slowly dispersed, wolves returned to their lives with a subtle shift in how they looked at her, not with deference, but with recognition. Later, when the clearing emptied and the night deepened, Elena and Nathaniel stood together beneath the stars. "You have changed more than you realize," he said quietly. She smiled, small but certain. "I think I have simply stopped pretending I was small," she replied. He studied her for a moment, then spoke words meant only for her. "From this night forward, you will not be asked to fade for anyone," he said. "Not even for me." She met his gaze, heart steady, unafraid. "I would not accept anything less," she said. And as they turned back toward the heart of the territory, walking side by side, the future did not loom like a burden or blaze like a promise. It waited, open and unwritten, ready to be shaped by two voices choosing, together, to be heard.